So a couple of days ago, I made my video discussing Pokemon Go, and the fact that some people thought that Pokemon Go's crazy success was a sign that maybe Nintendo needed to start putting their games on the competition's consoles, basically becoming somewhat of a third-party developer. Not something that I agreed with pretty much at all, although I did see the other side to the argument, which is something I tend to do. I like to give a voice to both sides of any argument or discussion that's happening. I think that that's an important thing to do. But at the end of the day, of course, as a huge Nintendo fan and a huge gamer, I thought that that was a crazy idea. Nintendo hardware always gets me excited. It gets a lot of people excited. We all know the Wii U wasn't a big success, but that doesn't necessarily mean that just because the Wii U failed and Pokemon Go on mobile platforms is so successful, that Nintendo should just throw away their own home console market. So beyond this whole conversation of Nintendo going third party just because Pokemon Go was so successful was another angle to this conversation, and it was something I barely got to touch on at the end of my last video, and I'm glad that I thought about this so I could come back and talk to you guys about it again. And this is the idea that Nintendo's consoles are maybe just a paywall for accessing their games and their content. And that's an interesting conversation. I have an opinion on that, as you can imagine, as a big gamer and as a big Nintendo fan. And believe it or not, I actually think that there's two answers to that question if Nintendo's consoles are a paywall for accessing their content. The first is that, yes, believe it or not, it may be surprising, but yeah, Nintendo's hardware is absolutely a paywall for accessing their content. But the thing is, if we're getting to the nitty-gritty of the definition of the word paywall, which I think is important to get out of the way first, is that everything is a paywall. The PlayStation is a paywall. The Xbox is a paywall. If you want to access those games, there's a paywall. Hell, even third-party games have a paywall. If you want to play Final Fantasy or Resident Evil or Grand Theft Auto, there's a paywall. You have to buy a console. In the same way you may have to buy a Wii U to be able to play Super Mario 3D World or Bayonetta 2, if you want to play Grand Theft Auto, you have to buy an Xbox or a PlayStation. If you want to play Destiny, if you want to play Halo, you have to buy an Xbox. If you want to play Uncharted, you have to buy a PlayStation. Hell, if you want to eat a Big Mac, you have to buy the Big Mac from McDonald's. I mean, paywall is the idea of a paywall is something that just exists in business and commerce today on planet Earth. It's not unique to gaming. It's not unique to just businesses that sell things. It's not unique to any one country. It's a universal concept that it just exists. If you want a good or a product or a service, you got to pay for it. Hence, the definition of the word paywall absolutely comes into play. So I feel like it's a little ridiculous to single out Nintendo and say they're the only company that has a paywall for accessing their content. That is stupid because everything is a paywall. I would love to be able to play Resident Evil and Street Fighter and Grand Theft Auto and Destiny and Halo and all of these things for free. I would love to be able to play The Legend of Zelda and Metroid and Mario and Bayonetta and Smash Brothers for free. But surprise, that's not the world we live in. We have to buy these products. We have to buy this hardware. We have to buy this food to eat it. You don't just get to eat for free, unfortunately. It's the way life is, and I think it's unique that people have singled out Nintendo and said, oh, well, there's a paywall for accessing Nintendo's games. Duh, there's a paywall. You have to buy the hardware. Hell, you have to buy the game. That's a paywall too. But of course, that's just, like I said, the actual practical definition of the word paywall. And as much as it's neat to kind of get that out of the way and say, well, that's a ridiculous concept, of course there's a paywall, we all know that that's not the real reason and the real context that people are trying to use the word paywall when they say Nintendo's hardware is a paywall. In the realm of the gaming world, they're saying that Nintendo's content is something that shouldn't be exclusive to a piece of hardware, that Nintendo shouldn't be making their own machines that only play their games. It's not fair. We should be able to play the Marios and Zeldas and Smash Brothers of the world on any console. We should be able to play it on our PC. We should be able to play it on the Xbox and the whatever. It should be available everywhere. And it's like, okay, well, obviously that means that maybe people have a lot of good taste because, hey, they want to play Nintendo's games. They recognize that Nintendo makes some of the best games, in my opinion, the best games in the industry, at least on the most consistent basis. And that's great. We want people to say, hey, Nintendo's games are great. And of course, you know, I love a lot of companies' games. It's not just Nintendo's. I'm a huge Naughty Dog fan. I like Square when they make good games. I like Capcom when they make good games. There's a lot of great companies out there. And I think it's neat to recognize when a company makes good games. Nintendo is very well known for being extremely high quality in the software development side of gaming. People have been very critical of the hardware, and I understand. I love the Wii U, but obviously they made mistakes, so it hasn't been successful. Okay, so Nintendo is struggling to make the kind of hardware that they should be making, and that's going to be it's going to have the appeal for a larger gaming audience. I agree with that. But to say that Nintendo's console is a paywall, like I've said several times, it just isn't fair. It's a weird element of singling out Nintendo. And I just think that that's ridiculous. It's like, you know what? If you acknowledge Nintendo's games are so good, and if they make so many games that are so worth your time that you want to play them, why wouldn't you buy their machine? This is the backwards way that gamers think nowadays. Like, no one bought the Wii U, right? So 13 million units sold, which is just so unfortunate after 4 years, and its competition has destroyed it in half that amount of time. And it's like, okay, so people, you're not buying the Wii U, you know, Nintendo's current hardware, but you do want to play their games, but now you're looking at their console as a paywall? Well, then why the hell did you buy the other guy? Why did you buy a PlayStation or an Xbox or whatever? I mean, that's a paywall that you were willing to pay for to get into those games, and to be fair, even though I like my PlayStation and Xbox a lot, there's way less compelling games that make you have to buy those machines. Yet, you're also acknowledging that Nintendo's machine is the one that has the most quality content that you want to buy, but that's where you hit a paywall that you're no longer comfortable purchasing. I mean, no wonder the Wii U didn't sell. People have this backwards-ass, completely illogical way of thinking that makes no sense, and I don't think that anyone with any level of common sense could possibly even understand or relate to. I just can't, I can't even put it into words anymore. I mean, it just makes no sense to me. Obviously, if Nintendo's games are great, well, then you know what you got to do? You have to buy their hardware. And Nintendo knows that, and I think that's why they've stuck to their guns for so long and said, we are not going to stop making hardware. The day we stop making hardware is the day we're no longer a gaming company, and I love that about them. As I discussed in my last video about them going third-party, part of the reason I think that that makes sense for Nintendo is because they also need to create their own proprietary hardware that uses their ideas, because they're always thinking of a new idea, a new way to interact, a new OS that does something crazy, a new controller, a touchscreen, motion control, whatever, and who knows what's happening with their, you know, the NX, and if it's a handheld hybrid thing, or if it's going to use smartphone technology and all these different things. They have so many ideas that they need more than just a regular old boring platform to put it on. Another PlayStation with the same old controller that they've been using for so long isn't really going to get the job done for Nintendo. They have too many ideas that they need to get out. They're always tooling away at the next big thing, and obviously they don't succeed every time. We know that, and it's okay for a company to fail every once in a while, but still be great at what they do and still be successful at what they do. And I think that Nintendo, that's exactly who they are. We're just coming to the end of their current failure, but they've had hundreds of successes before this current failure, and I think that they're going to have hundreds of successes and failures in the future. You know what? Just like Sony, just like Microsoft, just like Sega before them, and all these other things, Atari before Sega. That's just the way these things go. So everyone's caught up in the here and the now, and well, the Wii U just hasn't been successful, so Nintendo needs to go third party, and their consoles are just a paywall for their games. That's ridiculous. They're a paywall because, yes, you have to pay for things to be able to play video games in this world. Okay, everyone is that way, not just Nintendo. But they're not a paywall because they're not any more of a paywall, I should say, in the competition, because it just means that they have great games, and if you want to play them, the world we live in is you buy their hardware. I really hope that Nintendo never ends up listening to these concepts and considering this. We know that they've been successful. They've made a lot of money. They can support the failure of the Wii U and move on to the next thing, and we know that that's what they're doing. So hopefully the NX can kind of, you know, shut up a lot of these naysayers and a lot of these things that are happening and kind of squash this conversation. And I mean, I don't know, I guess that's really just it, you guys. Not as much from me to say about this. You know, typically I have a lot more to say on a subject. This was just so cut and dry, I think. The idea of Nintendo's consoles being any more of a paywall than the competition makes literally no sense. If anything, they're less of a paywall because there's a higher and more consistent quantity of really high quality games that Nintendo makes that's available on their hardware. So if anything, that's the first console people should be buying if they're the ones clamoring for these games but looking at the console as a paywall. The Wii U should have been the first system everyone bought, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, I also want to play these third-party games, so should I buy a PlayStation or should I buy an Xbox? But everyone ran to those two consoles, yet shunned the Wii U that everyone is acknowledging has the most amount of games that everyone wants to play. Anyway, I'm beating this into the ground. I could just go in circles about how there's no logic behind gamers nowadays, and I just, you know, Nintendo screwed up with the Wii U, I get it, but their games are so good, it just doesn't make any sense why it's been such the level of failure that it has been. Either way, I want you guys to discuss what you think. Is our Nintendo consoles, I should say, it's too early for me to talk apparently, are Nintendo consoles the only consoles in the market that are actually a paywall and preventing gamers from accessing quality games? I obviously don't think so. Nintendo makes great content and great software, so I'm always going to be willing to run out there and buy their consoles. Until they end up making one that isn't interesting to me, I'm always going to be looking forward to buying the next Nintendo hardware and playing their great games, because that's just the way this stuff works, you know? So discuss below if you think that there is any credence to this conversation of Nintendo's consoles being a paywall, or if you're more on my side and you think that that's kind of a ludicrous thing to say and a ludicrous way to think. And if a console has great games, no matter who makes it, it's not a paywall. Just buy it and just enjoy those games. So that's what's going on. Thanks, of course, for tuning in, guys. Share your thoughts about this kooky stuff below. This is Rob with Review, and I'll catch you guys next time on another video.